Rafael Devers is certainly kicking up some dust at Boston Red Sox spring training, saying he will not move off of third base. Red Sox seem very resolute in their determining who decides who plays when and where. We'll see who ultimately comes out of this one. Obviously, the Red Sox control the team, so we'll see how far this thing really goes. But tonight we get into the 2025 season preview for the Boston Red Sox. And with all the headlines around the Red Sox, no better time to discuss them than right now. Dylan Cease is still in the running for them to possibly acquire him to help bolster their already strong rotation after bringing in Garrett Crochet, Walker Buehler, and Patrick Sandoval this offseason. And then, of course, Alex Bregman. Really going to be the big linchpin in that lineup for them this year. We'll get into that and much, much more ahead here at the Upside. And welcome into the MLB Hot Stove Daily here at the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us early on a Wednesday evening. Hopefully you guys are staying warm out there. Energy costs are spiking starting yesterday. They're up over, I think, 70 cents for just natural gas in just the last couple of days. We don't do much as far as politics or costs or taxes or anything like that, but I just want to make sure you guys are staying warm out there, staying safe, as those electric bills and gas bills are going to go through the roof, so be prepared for those to happen fairly soon. But first things first, Boston Red Sox are making a lot of headlines, both for good and bad reasons. They've had a very good offseason, bringing in Garrett Crochet, addressing that bullpen with a couple of different additions, including Aroldis Chapman and a minor league deal for Adam Ottavino. And then, of course, their big linchpin of the offseason was bringing in Alex Bregman. Now, Bregman, in case you guys are wondering just how good he's been in Boston, second best on base percentage all time in Boston at Fenway Park history. I think OPS he actually leads in the entirety of the history of Fenway Park as well. There's another stat anyway. I can't remember the other one off the top of my head. I think it was slugging percentage that he's top 2 all time in there. Frank Robinson, players like that are the players he's really being compared against. Ted Williams as well. Just shows you how good of an offensive player, at least at Fenway, that they are getting. And so getting a player of his caliber this offseason as a right-handed bat, when that was their stated goal this offseason, to add an impact right-handed bat, exactly what the doctor ordered for them. Now, of course, Rafi Devers already plays his known position at third base. Devers, of course, is in a great option there at third base. At one time, he was at least a solid defender, maybe a little bit above average, but that defense has been a long time ago. And I think at this point, with them having him sign long term, you'd hope that he would be able to let cooler heads prevail, say, hey, I get it. Bregman's a gold glove caliber third baseman coming in. Time for me to move off my position. I'm getting paid very handsomely by this team no matter where I play, so why don't I just let the Red Sox put me where I'm best utilized for this team? So I think that's how it would work in a utopia. This isn't a utopia. And Devers wants to maintain his spot there at third base, basically calling a pseudo press conference for himself the other day, basically saying, I'm not moving off of third base. Alex Cora having to address these things the next day with the media, basically saying, yeah, that contract you signed was with a previous GM that promised you third base. That GM is no longer here. We are the Red Sox. I am the manager. I will draw up the lineup card, and you will play where you are designed to play. So we'll see how this one ultimately comes down here. I think this thing will be handled behind closed doors. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if the thing has already been squashed behind closed doors, because that's just how the Red Sox and Alex Cora run things there. I think they're a pretty stand-up organization, aside from a couple of issues that they had, say, in 2018, 2019, of course, the watch thing that they had an issue with. But in general, they tend to handle their business fairly well. The front office has been very reluctant to spend, and they finally have gone out there and spent on Alex Bregman, and this is the first headlines you get out of it. Not exactly what you want coming into spring training, but I think they'll let cooler heads prevail by the end of this thing. Now, defensively, will this thing be resolved by the end of spring training? Probably not. I think they'll be fiddling with its lineup pretty much the entirety of the first half of the year, seeing where it's best to play Bregman, where these young guys ultimately come up and make a difference anyway. Christian Campbell, one of their top second base prospects, is going to be playing sometime there at second base this year. Marcelo Mayer, I think, could be up and at the big league level at some point this year as well. And Roman Anthony, number 2 overall prospect in the game, could be the Rookie of the Year candidate out there in right field. Last year was their Rookie of the Year candidate, and Abreu is going to be moving over to left because they're going to be calling up Anthony. So kind of keep an eye out for that one. The rumors today around the Red Sox, on a positive note, is that they're still looking for some more improvements to this ball club. Dylan Cease being the most notable. The Padres, of course, have had a really high asking price on him. They asked for Colby Mayo, Basayo, etc. from the Orioles. Now the reports out there are saying that they asked for Abreu from the Red Sox. That's not going to happen. You're not going to trade 5 years of a guy who just finished in the top 3 of the AL Rookie of the Year voting just for 1 year of Dylan Cease. Now, could they use a player of his caliber? Absolutely. But I think they've already done enough in that starting rotation where they don't need to mortgage a lot of these long-term pieces that they've cultivated here. I think at the trade deadline, they might take advantage of some teams with some expiring deals like a Dylan Cease and just see if they can get him at a discount at that point. Say if the Astros get off to a terrible start because of the injuries in that starting rotation, the loss of Tucker and Bregman impact them a little bit more than they might expect. Say they're 7 or 8 games out of the wild card by that point, and then they say, hey, Framber Valdez is going to get a really big contract in free agency. We just struggled to sign a bunch of guys in free agency over the last 5-6 years of our franchise. Why don't we do what we did with Kyle Tucker and kind of keep our team afloat here by bringing in a major league piece and a couple of top-end prospects and keep this thing going? That could be something that happens out there. I know a lot of Houston fans aren't going to like to hear that, but that's just one example. There's a lot of teams that kind of fit that window, that if they're out of the wild card contention race, like the Blue Jays, Twins, etc., they could immediately go into sell mode, and a team like Boston could be sitting there with an opportunity to pounce. We'll get into the 2025 expectations here in just a little bit, but I want to say hello to everybody. Thank you guys for joining us on a Wednesday. Welcome in, Cowboys Nation. Holly, Ryan, Rafe, Jonathan, welcome in. Verlis, welcome back. Let's see here. Devers, the worst third baseman in baseball, crying about playing third base is hilarious. To some extent, I will say that you want that player to be confident in his abilities. That's not a problem. The problem I would have with it if I'm the Red Sox is that you're basically calling yourself an impromptu press conference to say, hey, I'm not moving off at third base. Saying that you want to stay at third base, saying that you believe you're the best third baseman for the team, saying all those things is just fine. But where you go out of your way to do those things, that's where I have a little bit of an issue. And I think the front office there will handle it. I think Alex Cora will handle it. Do I think it'll be anything that disrupts this clubhouse long term? I don't. Even if this thing gets out of spring training, it's still a festering issue in April. I still don't think it's going to be that much of a detriment to this team because they have a really good, solid team. I think Devers will figure out either A, to improve his play on the field, which would be a great thing for the Red Sox. That'd be a great problem for them to have, is to have him play at a Gold Glove level. Not saying that he did at one point, but I'm saying having him at that comparable level and having the versatility of a Bregman, play short, play second, play third, wherever they need him in the lineup, would be a really nice ace up the sleeve to have. But that would require Devers to be a much better third baseman than he showed last year defensively. Welcome in. I was just wondering when you were going to go live. Well, you are correct. We went live right at that moment. What's up, Jonathan? Sorry to do this to you real quick. I got 2 things to ask about basketball. Cool. Thoughts on Moses Brown and what he could do for us. And you heard KD would be a Mav right now, but no third team would join the trade. I'm glad it didn't happen first for the KD thing. I really hope it doesn't happen in the offseason, but I'm hearing too many rumblings about that being a legitimate possibility. I think it would gut the depth on the Mavericks. I really hope they don't do it. 2, as far as the Moses Brown addition, I think they really needed to do it. That move will happen on Friday. That way they can have him for the maximum amount of time for that 10-day contract to be utilized at its best. Maybe Thursday at the earliest, but I'd expect Friday to get him on the roster. He's going to be the only player, I believe, in the 7-foot range or even close to it, at least for the foreseeable future. They're going to get P.J. Washington back, so I think it's just another player with size. He's been playing really well in the G League, but he's been doing that for years. Whenever he gets up to the NBA, he always has his struggles, especially with fouls. We'll see if he can stay on the floor with the Mavericks. At worst case scenario, he at least gives you some type of a rim deterrent, whereas now there really isn't one until the other bigs come back for the Mavs. Welcome in, Verlis. I said Devers is going to be a pain about going to first. I'm sure the tensions are low at camp. I think Devers is just going to have to figure out what's more important to him. Is it more important that he becomes a locker room cancer and stays at third base? Or is it more important that he contributes to a winning ball club? Because I think that's going to be part of the difference here, is because his defensive abilities at third base have fallen off, Putting Bregman over there would improve themselves defensively and allow them to have a really good infield as far as defensive alignment and allow them to save some runs, a lower scoring game from the opposition, a higher scoring game for yourself because you have Bregman and Devers in the lineup both helping out there. So I think that's really what it's going to come down to here, and I think the front office and Alex Cora will squash this type of an issue. Rafe, going to watch hockey for the first time in a while tomorrow, U.S.-Canada game. Doubt we get fireworks again, but you can only hope. I think it's going to be a very competitive game. I think the United States is going to take it, but of course I'm an American, so kind of take that with a huge grain of salt there. Cowboys Nation, San Diego on drugs with their asking price for Cease. I don't know about that one. I mean, his value right now is around 30, 31. That's about the value before the season. He is a very good starting pitcher. You'd have the ability to negotiate a long-term deal. You'd have the ability to try to sign him in free agency afterward. It'd really elevate this team for the Red Sox to a team that I would consider the favorite in the American League East if they did add Dylan Cease without changing too much of the Major League roster or giving up one of those top 3 prospects that they have. I think that's the primary motivation here for the trade for the Red Sox. If they get him in there without giving up those pieces, they'd really have something. But for the Padres, it's right for them to go ahead and set this really high asking price because nobody else is going to give you this really high asking price unless you ask for it. No team is going to outspend just because they do it of their own volition unless they're the Dallas Mavericks just giving you the best piece in a trade and just getting pittance in return. Sorry to kind of twist the knife once again for my Mavericks fans out there, but very rarely do we see a team go out there and kind of screw themselves over for the long haul like we did the Dallas Mavericks. For instance, the Dylan Cease trade here, if a team are willing to give up a piece like Mayo or Basayo or Abreu or any of these top-end pieces that they're being rumored for, then shame on those organizations for giving up those pieces. But the Padres, they're not doing anything wrong as far as the front office by asking for those pieces. We just saw Luka go for pittance. Who's to say that Dylan Cease couldn't bring back a king's ransom from a team just overestimating his value on the market, and 2, that his impact on the team, especially given the fact he's going to be a free agent after the year. You're not going to get that overpaid price unless you ask for it. So good on the Padres for at least asking for it. That price will naturally come down. You always want to start it really, really high and just see who's at least taking some nibbles at it, saying, hey, we're interested in Dylan Cease, maybe not at Abreu, but maybe we'll give you a couple of guys that add up to it. We'll get into some trade talk with the Red Sox tonight and discuss those things. Sam, not a team player, trade Devers. You're not going to trade that contract right now. That contract is completely got too much money on it, and now if the locker room issues that or clubhouse issues that you're having, no way is anybody going to take that contract. So I wouldn't even start those type of rumors there, even if I was a Red Sox fan, because the only thing that would do is drive down his price even further, making him even more impossible to trade. Cassis has to close his... I'll put it this way. A lot of the Red Sox players are a little bit too noisy for my taste on the issue of where this defensive alignment is going to go. It's spring training, guys. We haven't even started spring training games. Let's see how we get into spring training. See who is even healthy by the time we get to opening day. Say if Devers pulls a hammy during spring training, guess who's going to be at third base come opening day? That's right, Alex Bregman. If Alex Bregman is lighting the world on fire at third base because Devers couldn't start the season because of a pulled hammy, guess who's going to stay at third base once Devers is back and healthy? That's right, Alex Bregman is going to stay there. So kind of take all these, controversies in spring training with a big grain of salt. Take all the performances that you see in spring training with a huge grain of salt as well, because somebody who's knocking the cover off the ball in March, in February, might not be doing so in April. You might be seeing some players kind of overplaying their hand, if you will, and might be that the mirage, if you will, that you might be overestimating their ability. So kind of keep that in mind as well. Luka trade, don't hurt me no more. I'm excited for Christie every game and AD when healthy. I hear you, Rafe. For me, it's now the Max Christie trade, at least until one of the other 2 players in the deal outperforms Max Christie. Because so far, Max Christie has been the best player in the deal so far, averaging over 17 points a game with the Dallas Mavericks over, 7 games so far. He's been the best player in the trade. AD had a great first half and a pretty good third quarter as well. But he's played, 20 minutes in the Mavericks uniform? Luka Doncic's on a minutes restriction so far and still hasn't reached the efficiency that we expect for him. Obviously, both of those players are going to be better than Max Christie. At least you would expect them to be. But right now, I still refer to it as the Max Christie deal for right now, if I'm a Mavericks fan. Cowboys Nation, Boris equals no extension. I'm not rooting for Boston to add him. I don't personally see him as an ace. That's kind of my thoughts as well. I see Dylan Cease as a really good hot and cold pitcher. When he's on, he's on. But when he's off, he's really off. We're talking ERA over 4, but when he's on, we're talking a sub-3 ERA with a Cy Young potential. He's had 2 years of that caliber. Otherwise, it's been over 4 for the other 4 years of his major league career. I would like to see him get a little bit more consistent with his performance on the field before I really invest those free agent dollars. I'm not really thinking an extension will happen for Cease. I'm just saying by trading for him now, you could at least open the door to those types of discussions. And Boston, I think they're showing the willingness to start spending again, and I hope they don't pull off because, this was a great offseason for them. Getting Crochet, bringing in Walker Buehler, bringing in Bregman, Chapman, and still adding other pieces in the minor league side of things to kind of supplement this roster. I'd really hate to see this team kind of stagnate next year because, hey, we've got the young kids coming up. We don't need to invest in our team because we have the young kids. I really don't want to see that happen for Boston. I hope they continue to spend next year. Rafe, if you were to divide the Red Sox, Mets, and Blue Jays into a total 100% chance, what would you say the odds for Vladdy goes to those 3 teams? So we're taking out the other teams in the league. So if we were just saying those 3 teams are the only teams Vladdy would go to, I would say Mets at probably 45%. I'd say Red Sox at 30% probably. Blue Jays at 25%. I might go Red Sox at 40% actually. 15% for the Blue Jays. Yeah, I'd probably go with that route. I'd say Mets would be the favorite out of those 3. I'd say the Red Sox would be very close second. Blue Jays a distant third. Sam, just heard this. 49ers are selling 10% of the team for $9.1 billion evaluation. I know the Giants are looking to do that as well. I know Eli Manning is looking to do it or to get in on the ownership there for the Giants. So we'll have to see what happens there. But interesting news coming out of the NFL. All right, let's continue our headlines for today before we get into the Boston Red Sox season preview. Day 2 of the Vladimir Guerrero circus officially is underway. Remember, headlines came out yesterday that extension talks were over, no progress was really made, numbers were were nowhere close, and Vladdy was expecting to go to free agency and wasn't willing to discuss an extension. Well, as you expect, a lot of the headlines coming out of Toronto today are, hey, what do you think, Vlad? Would you like to reopen those discussions at some point this season? No. Hey, Vlad, what do you think of your team around you? Do you think this is a team that you could see winning in the future? I don't know. I'm focused on 2025. And just continue on down the list. This is just day 2 of the circus. Expect this thing to get hella noisy, especially around the trade deadline. It's going to be crazy around Vlad the entirety of the season. And the Blue Jays brought this on themselves with not getting that extension done. Not this offseason, but last offseason. I told you guys this offseason would be judged as to whether or not they get that extension done with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. They failed, and so they get an F for the offseason this year. I get it, they brought in Anthony Santander. I get it, they brought in Hoffman. I get it, they brought in Scherzer. But the long-term addition of Anthony Santander does not bring you a stable organization when your biggest piece is about to leave in free agency, or at least looks like he will be leaving in free agency. Not to mention Bo Bichette, your second best player as well. A couple other minor league signings I wanted to point to. The Royals adding some depth there with Ross Stripling. We had a couple of major league signings as well. The Nationals adding Lucas Sims from the Reds, 1 year, $3 million to help out their bullpen. Rockies, who we just did the team preview for the other day, added Scott Alexander, 1 year, $2 million deal. So we're seeing some bullpen arms come off the board. As far as some free agents that are still out there that could be a difference maker for your team that you don't have to trade for, you're looking Andrew Heaney is still out there, David Robertson is still out there. I think that a lot of the teams that were looking for bullpen pieces have already pretty much filled up their bullpens right now. I would expect some trades. Robert Suarez comes to mind, Ryan Helsley around the trade deadline. I'm beginning to lean towards the Cardinals holding true on their word on that one. I would have traded him before the season. I would have traded him at the winter meetings when relief prices were just so sky high. They could have gotten a very nice return for him. If he has a poor start to the season or he has an injury, which are both not out of the realm of possibility, because Helsley's had those issues before, you're going to drive down the price there, possibly even reducing that return to 0 as well. But it's finally getting, the spring training is getting close to actually having some games being played, and we'll actually cover a few of those games in the spring training season. So appreciate you guys joining us as well. For the sake of it being a Red Sox video, let's say the deadline, the Red Sox have a shot to trade for Vladdy. What would the trade look like? We will do that trade specifically later on in the broadcast, so be sure to join us for that one. It's Cowboys Nation Guardian signed Means. That's one that already had been reported a couple of days ago. Basically, it's a $1 million deal with, I believe, $7.5 million as a club option for the next year. Basically, if his rehab goes well and he looks like he'll be a starter next year, Means will have that club option picked up. If he doesn't rehab well, it looks like he's reached the end of the line. Guardians can obviously cut bait with him at the end of the season, but think of him as kind of a Tyler Mahle, a lottery ticket that the Rangers bought last year. They only paid him a few million last year and are paying him $17 million this year because they're expecting him to be a big part of the Rangers rotation. Think of that type of a contract here for John Means, basically buying a injury-filled year, having the club option to where if he's good, ready to go next year, they're basically buying him at that price for next year as well. As you'd also have Jose Urena still out there, another depth option for somebody who needs a swing starter, somebody who could be a multi-inning reliever out of the bullpen. But those are kind of the headlines of the day. All right. Appreciate you guys joining us today. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe. Notice we got about 30 of you guys with us right now, so be sure to share us on X, send us on Blue Sky, Facebook, wherever you post. Go ahead and share the video and tag your Boston Red Sox fans as we're about to begin the 2025 season preview for the Boston Red Sox. Let's see here. Rod, welcome in. I would say we would want Casas and other players for Vladdy. That would be one possibility, but we'll get into that trade here in just a moment. Welcome in, Vinny. So without further ado, let's begin the 2025 season preview for the Boston Red Sox. Welcome into the 2025 season preview show for the Boston Red Sox. My name is Michael here at the Upside Sports Network. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe here on YouTube. Make sure you turn on those notifications so you're notified whenever we do go live. Every single evening we'll be live breaking down all the latest from the hot stove season, gearing up through spring training, and throughout the entirety of the MLB season. Follow us on X at UpsideSN and on Facebook at Upside Sports Network. Off-season for the Red Sox was pretty great. They brought in Garrett Crochet via trade without giving up a couple of their top-end prospects, ultimately trading away a catching prospect there. They already have a good catcher on their roster, so good on them for getting Garrett Crochet, who hit 99 on the radar gun already in spring training, so off to a great start there. They also brought in Walker Buehler, great experience there with the Los Angeles Dodgers. He's a big game pitcher, and I think that's going to be invaluable for a Boston Red Sox team who I envision is going to be making a wild card appearance this year, maybe even surprising some and winning the division. But the Boston Red Sox, the biggest move for me, late in free agency, adding Alex Bregman on a 3-year, $120 million deal with opt-outs after the first and second year. You guys already know about the deferrals, basically making it a present-day value of around 3 for 90. Either way, one of the two best hitters at Fenway Park history, and now they have that impact right-handed bat that they were really looking for the entirety of the offseason. And even bigger news, the front office finally went out and ponied up and spent some money, put their money where their mouth was, saying, oh yeah, we're all in. We're going to increase our payroll last offseason. They didn't do it. They finally did it here with Alex Bregman. They didn't do it yet with Garrett Crochet, but they finally do it here with Alex Bregman. Now, they're out of practice as far as negotiating deals. I think Boris and Bregman kind of took them to the cleaners as far as this deal is concerned, but either way, they get the player that I think is going to be the most helpful to this team overall this season. I think the sky is the limit right now for the Boston Red Sox, really high on what they have as far as the youth on this team. Abreu finished in the top 3 of the American League Rookie of the Year voting. He's going to be moving off of right field, moving over to left to make room for another Rookie of the Year candidate in Roman Anthony, the number 2 overall prospect in the entire game. You also have a good prospect coming up at second base in Christian Campbell, Marcelo Mayer coming up at shortstop. This is a team that's got a lot of youth coming, and they're still looking to add more pieces to this lineup as well. Rumors just today saying that they turned down an offer of Abreu for Dylan Cease. Dylan Cease, of course, a player that they've been connected to the entirety of the offseason as they've tried to upgrade their rotation. Now, remember, they've already addressed their rotation, bringing in Garrett Crochet. They brought in Walker Buehler. In addition to the pieces, they already had some really good young pitchers already on the staff there last year. Those guys got some really good experience last year, and another year older, another year wiser, another year a little bit more efficient at the major league level, you would hope. And Patrick Sandoval was another depth piece they signed there as well. They addressed some needs in the bullpen with Aroldis Chapman, some minor league signings of Abraham Toro, and just yesterday, Adam Ottavino on a minor league deal returns to the Boston Red Sox, a team he's played for a couple of different times in his career. Really like what the Red Sox have done, but without further ado, let's get into their lineup. All right, so looking at their depth chart right now, let me get all these ads out of the way on this website. This is Fangraphs, in case you guys are wondering. Kind of projects how their lineup is really going to go. Really love Jared Duran at their leadoff spot. Kind of had some growing to do last year as far as maturity. Hopefully he has learned his lesson, but at 28 and a half years old, only 2 years of service time, they have his rights for several more years, and that speed really does play in that Boston Red Sox lineup. They're projecting him a 3.5 WAR season. Honestly, I think that's a little low. I think the defense that he's going to provide out there in center, I think the speed that he provides on the base paths and the on base that he provides are going to be invaluable to this team. 2, they've got penciled in their Devers. 3, they got Bregman. Casas over there at first base. Yoshida's your penciled in DH. Trevor Story currently their shortstop. Abreu in right. Connor Wong as their catcher. And Rafaela in center. As far as this lineup, it's not a bad lineup. I just think that this is a lineup that's not going to be the entirety of the season. I think this is a team that's going to call up Roman Anthony very quickly. Looking at their bench, they got Rob Refsnyder, David Hamilton, Romy Gonzalez, and Carlos Narvaez making the bench for them. Like I said, I'm expecting Roman Anthony to be to be up at the major league level very early on in the season for them, and I'm expecting Duran to slide over to center, Abreu over to left, and Anthony out there in right. At shortstop, Story hasn't been the greatest provider for them since signing that lucrative contract that he got at the end of free agency a couple of years ago. I think that's a spot where we see Mayer come up towards the All-Star break, maybe a little bit after, really kind of inject some youth and excitement, adrenaline into this team as well. And then, of course, today we get into all the headlines around Rafi Devers and Alex Bregman and the questions about who plays third base. Here's what I'll say about this. I think this is an issue that will be solved as far as, quotes to the media, etc. That'll be solved early on in spring training. But do I think this defensive alignment will be solved early in spring training? No. I think this is a defensive alignment that will be ever-changing. Say you enter the season with Rafi Devers with pulled hamstring. Obviously, Bregman slides over to third as a gold glove caliber third baseman. And if he's latched on to third base and he's playing very, very well, Devers may very well come back and be their designated hitter until he learns to play another position. That's one way this thing could go. Say Devers goes into spring training and says, hey, they brought in a gold glove caliber third baseman. I better get my butt in gear and start playing a better defensive third base. That's another possibility. I'm sure the Red Sox would prefer that one rather than Devers going out there to the media today and basically calling himself, yesterday anyway, calling himself an impromptu press conference saying, hey, I'm playing third base, period. And then Cora having to address things, basically saying, hey, that $313 or whatever $1 million contract that you signed with the previous GM was exactly that with the previous GM. Promises made by that GM are not promises made by the Red Sox organization, are certainly not promises made by me as manager of this team, and I and the Red Sox organization will decide who plays third base, no one else. So, shots fired by both sides. I think getting everybody behind closed doors will calm all this down from a media perspective. But I think it's a good problem to have this really good offensive pieces that are going to try to challenge each other on the defensive side of things. At least that's how I'm hoping it plays out for Rafi Devers. Now, as far as Tristan Casas, Yoshida, etc., these are two pieces that were rumored to be dealt at in the offseason for a piece like Luis Castillo. If they brought in Alex Bregman, I wouldn't necessarily rule that out from happening at the trade deadline. They would love to get off the money of Yoshida, but I think the only way they do that is that they get a difference-making piece in return. They are looking for another ace type of a pitcher. Whether or not you believe Dylan Cease is one of those guys or Luis Castillo, those are two of the names that have been connected most frequently with the Boston Red Sox. Now, of course, Vladdy Jr. is going to be a name that's going to be brought up a lot during the season with the Blue Jays not getting that extension done for him. So we'll have to see what happens, as we get closer to the trade deadline. If they try to upgrade at first base, put in Vladdy, trade out Casas in that deal, that would be a deal that we will revisit here towards the end of the video. But that's a possibility the Red Sox could go down as well. Let's see here. Let's look at their starting pitching here. They have it penciled in for 6 starters. I'm not sure they'll start the season with 6 just because injuries happen. But Garrett Crochet really pitched for the first time with any longevity last year. And so we'll have to see how he rebounds from that. But he's only 25, almost 26 years old. He's got 3 options left. So he's got some versatility there if they do need to shut him down for a while if an arm gets tired. But he's a very different pitcher than what they've had in years at the top of this rotation. He takes over as their only lefty, at least penciled in right now, according to Fangraphs, and probably the highest ceiling out of this group. Houck, of course, is your number 2. Bayo, number 3. Buehler is their number 4, and they're penciling Giolito as their number 5, and Crawford as the 6. Like I said, I'm not sure if this is a team that goes with 6 during the season, but we'll see how injuries play a role as we get into this team here. For their bullpen, you got a couple of different closer types there. You got Liam Hendricks, Aroldis Chapman, of course, with some good history there. I wonder if Hendricks gets the first nod at closer. Chapman, I think, is more of a setup guy at this point in his career as well. Rest of this bullpen, you got Whitlock, Slayton, Weissert, Wilson, and Winchowski. I'm not sure if I pronounced the name right there in long relief. And then, of course, you have on the 60 IL one of their starting pitchers they brought in this offseason in Patrick Sandoval. Had elbow surgery in the middle of last year. He'll probably be an all-star break kind of addition for this rotation bullpen, wherever they end up slotting him. So you see the depth they really created in that starting staff. Bullpen could use another arm here. But looking at the WAR of their lineup overall, they project at least 3 guys over a 3 WAR and then a couple more over 2. I'm expecting bigger numbers for Alex Bregman. I'm expecting a bigger year for Jarren Duran. Devers, I think they have fairly accurate in there. I think they have no accountability here as far as what the numbers here would be for a Roman Anthony if he plays, say, 120 games at the major league level this year. I think that's a very legitimate possibility as well. Campbell, I think, could play another 80 games at the big league level before it's all said and done. Looking into the minor leagues, just kind of see if there's any players that we might want to keep an eye on. Zebby Zavala, some good major league experience there, giving some depth at catcher. Nobody there at first base that really jumps out. Christian Campbell, of course, the top prospect they have at second base. He will see some time. Vaughn Grissom, another piece that should be drawing some eyes there for Red Sox fans. He could be a piece that is on the Major League roster if Trevor Story has some injury issues out of camp. Maybe he'd be on the big league roster to start the year as well with his versatility. Then the 2 pieces that they signed this offseason, or one of the pieces they signed this offseason, Abraham Toro. Good versatility there, third base, first base. He can play all over the diamond. I thought he was a good insurance policy. If they didn't bring in Alex Bregman, I thought he had a chance to make the big league roster if he showed that same offensive potential that he once did with the Astros, Mariners, and A's. But at least right now, it looks like he'll probably start the season in the minors. Nick Eaton also still here. Shortstop, of course, Nick Sogard, a veteran there. But Marcelo Mayer is the real name everybody's going to be paying attention to. How good is he? They're projecting only 35 plate appearances. I'm expecting a lot more than that out of Marcelo Mayer. I think we're going to see close to 30 to 60 games out of him at minimum this year out of Marcelo Mayer, especially if Story has his struggles. Trace Thompson, the non-roster invitee. Good depth there if they have some injury issues as the season goes along. But Roman Anthony, they're projecting for about half the season to be on the big league level if they're projecting to have 370 plate appearances. 9 homers, I think that's about right. 7 stolen bases, that seems incredibly low. I'm expecting big things out of Roman Anthony, and I think there's a good chance he wins the American League Rookie of the Year. On the pitching side, Quinn Priester is a piece that would be a name to kind of keep an eye on there. Nobody else really pops out to me as far as depth pieces there on the starting pitching side. And then in the bullpen, look at the pieces that they brought in. A lot of names you might recognize here. Jacob Webb, Sean Newcomb, Michael Fulmer, Adam Ottavino. Those are some names that might pop out to you guys that might show some promise to the Red Sox throughout the season, but they do have some depth here on this roster. So that's kind of your lineup, the rotation, bullpen. Let's look at their prospects here. Now, in 2024, their top 3 here, all of these guys were in the top 100 with, what was it, Arias was the 4th guy. Let me see if the 25 top 100 here. I think it was Arias was the 4th guy. Yep. So this is the 25 top 100 entering the year. Roman Anthony, number 2 prospect in the game. Christian Campbell, 7 prospect in the game. Marcelo Mayer, number 12. 3 guys in the top 12. Red Sox have a bevy of young talent coming. Now, beyond that, they only have one other top 100 guy. You'd expect those 3 guys to ultimately be on the big league roster at some point this year. Arias might jump into that top 50 by the end of the year. That'd be one player I'd be looking at from the prospect pool going forward. But gotta love where the Red Sox stand with this roster here. Let me pull up their prospect system here. Again, looking at the top three guys, those guys I'm expecting on the big league roster at some point. And then you get a whole bunch of young guys here. I love that the Red Sox have continued to churn over this prospect pool over the last 4 or 5 years. And they've got some really good young talent already on the big league roster with another wave coming. So they've got a really nice long runway set up here. And now it's time to go out there and spend in free agency. And they finally committed to it by bringing in Alex Bregman. Now's the time to do so. And they get one of the two or best hitters in Fenway Park history, the active one anyway, and Alex Bregman still being out there, of course. Then you get Hall of Famers like Frank Robinson, Ted Williams, of course. Only numbers comparable to Alex Bregman at Fenway Park. Of course, Bregman has a much smaller sample size. We'll have to see how he performs actually being in a Red Sox uniform. But all of these things bode well for the Red Sox going into 2025. As far as wins of the offseason, are finally going out there and spending the money, changing the narrative around this organization. They were saying they were all in to try to, add some big payroll last offseason. They didn't do it. Fans rightfully kind of protested that type of, or that lack of spending. And now they finally go out there and do it. It looked like they were going to go out there and just do it the trade route with Garrett Crochet earlier this offseason. But luckily enough, the Red Sox finally get that big bat that they've really been looking for in Alex Bregman. Really like that signing for them. That 1-2 punch, bringing in Crochet, adding Bregman, and then, of course, continuing their additions in that starting staff with Walker Buehler. Really like where this team is headed. And then, of course, as you see on the screen, the top three prospects here, Anthony, Mayer, and Campbell, really like where all three of those pieces are going. They have bright futures there for the Boston Red Sox. Misses of the offseason, not getting Bregman signed to a long-term deal, I think is going to prove to be more costly than what the deal they already signed to him was. If they had offered him, say, 7 years at $210 million fully guaranteed, I think they could have gotten him at that number. If Bregman really goes off, like I'm expecting him to have a really productive season this year, I know there's a lot of faithful fans in my chat that'll say, he was a product of the Crawford boxes. Well, guess what? He's going to get a souped-up version of that with Fenway Park, and he's going to be playing there 81 games a year. He's still going to play some in Houston when they do go down to Houston 3 games a year. He's going to be a very good offensive piece, and he finally looked like the Alex Bregman of old over the final 4 months of the season last year. I'm expecting big things from him, and I think that could be one of the misses of this offseason, that they could have locked him up long-term at a lower value number, whereas if he has a huge, monstrous season, he may very well leave and go to the Yankees next offseason because they're still going to need a third baseman next year, and they're going to have some money to spend next year as well. Maybe they go that route, maybe they go Vlad, but I think they missed an opportunity to sign him to a long-term guaranteed deal rather than this 3-year deal with opt-outs after the first or second year. That'd be the quote-unquote miss for me. As far as a mistake this offseason, I think they really avoided those big mistakes. I think they avoided making the Abreu for Dylan Cease trade so far. Maybe they'll surprise us and lose their minds like the Dallas Mavericks front office did and trade Luka Doncic for a bag of broken potato chips. But as far as I'm concerned, the Red Sox have had a really nice offseason. Have they done everything that they needed to this offseason? Pretty much. They've checked every item on this on their checklist for them. I think they still could use another bullpen arm, but I think everybody could use one of those. Maybe a David Robertson could be a one guy that's still out there on free agency, or they try to address that at the trade deadline. Same thing with another starter. I think they could use one of those if they have some injury issues in that rotation, which is what I am expecting there. As far as the payroll for Boston, let's take a look and see where they stand. Look at where their money is being spent. Remember, $40 million with the deferrals in those contracts, of course, kind of keep those in mind. Average annual value of around more like 31 with the deferrals there. For Bregman, he's the tops of the payroll right now. Devers at around $30 million. He's signed for 10 years, though. He'll be signed through at least 2033, it looks like. And then you get into Walker Buehler, Giolito, etc. Giolito, if he doesn't come back and perform this year, I think that mutual option will be declined. That'll free up some money there. Aroldis Chapman's only signed to a 1-year deal. That would free up some money. And I think with the addition of Bregman, if they attach Casas to a Yoshida, they could offload that $18 million salary and really go out there and spend next offseason as well. As far as where their payroll is at, just want to show you guys where they're at right now. They're right up against the luxury tax threshold. They're about $400,000 over. I would expect them to try to offload a little bit of salary at some point this year, even if it's just a minor option or two. I think that would be one way they would try to get underneath that luxury tax payroll for them. Look at their future years, though. They dropped down to 153, 140. this is a team that has flexibility in future years and could have even more if they find a taker for Yoshida's deal. So they're in a really nice spot with their payroll. I think at the deadline or even before then, maybe even before the start of the season, they're able to offload a little bit of salary, give themselves a little bit of breathing room as they go into the 2025 season. So as far as payroll, they're in a really nice spot. As far as holes that are left, I think they could add a bullpen piece just like everybody else. They could add a number one starter just like everybody else. But let's go ahead and get into some trade talk here with the Boston Red Sox. I know a lot of you guys are asking about Vlad, so we'll start there. Vlad Guerrero to the Boston Red Sox. If they're out of contention, what would that look like? Well, it's an in-division trade, so you know it's going to be a pretty valuable trade going back to the Blue Jays anyway. But looking at this team, remember at the trade deadline, you're going to see his value drop. So the number I've been using for Guerrero around the trade deadline is around $18 million as far as the value for him. Right now, before the season, a full year of Vladdy, you're looking around 23. But if you try to bring him in around the trade deadline, I would expect a reasonable value for him, maybe even a little inflated value, would be around 18. So what would they have to include to be able to get up to about that 20 or about that $18 million mark if you're Boston? Well, you're not going to include Duran, Anthony, Bayo, Houck, Campbell, Crochet, Abreu, any of those pieces. You're not going to do those. So keep coming on down here. You're still too high. Devers still has some positive value, but at 23, still too high. You're not going to offload that salary because you're trying to win right now anyway. They have some good pieces here, though. I think if they're with their outfield being so young, with Duran out there, with Abreu and Anthony, I think they could go ahead and move off of Miguel Blaze. I think that would be one of the first pieces that the Blue Jays would try to put in this trade. And that gets you at least one centerpiece of this deal. So I'd say another $6 million is what you're looking for here. So around that number, I'd say a shortstop like Mikey Romero could be one. Gives you a long-term option if Bo Bichette leaves in free agency. Let's validate the trade. Minor overpay right now, but at the trade deadline, that'll be fairly accurate. And there's your deal. Couple of 20-year-old prospects going to the Blue Jays with bright futures for Vlad Guerrero. I know it wouldn't be a good thing for Blue Jays fans. They're hoping to sign him long term. But if they're out of it and it looks like Vladdy's leaving in free agency, this would be better than what the compensation pick would be, in my opinion. So I would do this trade. Remember, if they lose Vlad Guerrero in free agency, I'm sure they would do the qualifying offer and they'd get some compensation back. So whatever you're getting in trade at the deadline is going to have to be better than what that compensation pick would be, plus whatever the end-year value would be for Vladdy Guerrero Jr., and the chance to be able to try to sign him before you get to free agency for Vladdy. Now kind of take all that in, and that's why I say around $18 million is about the value point here, and that's why this trade here to me makes a lot of sense. But let's say that they wanted to go the trade route for a starting pitcher. Say they're really desperate to get a number one early in the season. So they go to the Padres like they've been talking already with about Dylan Cease. And remember, they're not going to trade Abreu in this deal, but Cease isn't exactly cheap. Look at his value here. He's got about a 33 field value right now. If you try to get him at the deadline, I don't think he would be there. I think the Padres, if they're going to move him, will be early in the season. Otherwise, they're going to try to extend him. So if you're going to try to get him, the finance guys with San Diego anyway are your best friends because they're going to be the ones that will convince the front office to trade him because that front office does not want to trade Dylan Cease. So that's where you're going to have to start. Now, what is the trade going to have to look like? Well, again, we're looking around 33 to begin the year. So you're not going to trade Abreu. So that's already off the table at 33 or 35 anyway. So maybe Casas could be the long-term piece that could go back the other way as kind of a major league piece. That actually wouldn't be a bad option. But I think they're going to go a little bit younger here. I think they'll go Arias as the centerpiece of this deal. That would give you a top 100 prospect to build around. Let's go Blyce as the outfielder because they could use some outfielders there. And then I want to go to their major league roster because I think the Padres want a major leaguer back in return. So I want to go a cheap option here. Somebody who doesn't have a whole lot of value, doesn't impact winning too much for the Red Sox, but would give some depth back the other way. Quinn Priester, who's on the minor league side of things, might be a piece for them. Their value is right at 27, so around 6 is really where we're looking. Wong's going to be too valuable. Whitlock out of the bullpen could be a piece. Slayton could be a piece. Doesn't look like you're going to get a major league piece off of this roster. It doesn't look like a great fit. So let's go with the minors options here. So again, we're looking around 6 or 7. They like their starting pitching depth. They could use another shortstop piece. Romero, that's a pretty good value there. Let's validate and post it. So remember the trade we just did for Guerrero basically had Blyce and Romero in that deal. Well, now to get Dylan Cease, you're going to have to include Arias, a top 100 guy, and that package you were going to give for Guerrero to get Dylan Cease. So not too bad of a package there. Remember, they turned down the offer of Abreu today already. Now, that's not going to happen, so you're going to have to go this route if you're wanting a top 100 guy out of the Boston Red Sox. D-Rod, welcome in. Doing pretty well, freezing just like the rest of you guys. Hopefully you guys turn down your heat because electricity, gas, everything is going to go through the roof. Actually, it started a couple of days ago. Natural gas is already up over 75 cents from where it was a couple of days ago, representing huge spikes. So expect your electric bills and gas bills to be really, really high over the next month or two. Really hope you guys stay warm out there, but be prepared. And hopefully you guys stay warm out there. Who do you see getting traded before spring training ends? I think we'll see a ton of players getting traded. I think there's an opportunity if the Rangers see a ability to add another starter that could be better than what they already have. Maybe they go that route. I'm beginning to believe that they're going to keep this roster as currently constructed unless they make another big addition to that bullpen more than anything else. The one piece that would move out of that would be Leody Taveras. As far as pieces to kind of target here at the deadline or here before spring training ends, I would look at Robert Suarez for the Padres. Dylan Cease would be another one for the Padres that I could see them moving. And Luis Arias. I think the most likely of those names is Robert Suarez. Dylan Cease might be the second most likely out of that group there. I think Stroman is a good bet to be moved before the start of the opening day because I think he'll have some more value to a team that's looking for another, fourth, fifth starter type that might be looking to take advantage of the Yankees' need to trim payroll and kind of clear up some money before they get to the All-Star break, before the trade deadline, so they can make some bigger moves at that point. That would be another piece I would keep an eye on as well. We could see a bunch of bullpen arms get moved, guys that are competing for the last spot in a rotation get moved. Pieces like that I would expect. Non-roster invitees that have a good spring that don't look like they're going to make a roster could be traded to another club as we get closer to opening day as well. So those are some things that I'm looking out for. I wouldn't expect any landmark seismic shifts in baseball. For instance, we're not going to see a Aaron Judge caliber player be moved at this point. Biggest moves I think we see are going to be guys that are going to be set for free agency after the year. Think Dylan Cease, think Framber Valdez, players like that if we're looking for an out-of-the-blue trade, that's more likely to happen than, say, some of the other big mainstays on a roster. I know one of you guys was advocating for Devers to trade earlier in the chat. That's not going to happen. He has too much money on his contract, and that's not going to happen after they just signed Alex Bregman. They want to see this team and how it performs on the field before they make any long-term decisions with their roster. But as far as holes remaining, like I said, I think they could make an impact, go for an impact back like a Vladdy. They could go for a bullpen piece just like everybody else in the league. And then, of course, the big trade here for Dylan Cease to help out that rotation as well. Now, where do I see them finishing in 2025? Well, let's see where they finished last year. Last year, Boston finished, 5 games out of the final wildcard spot, finished 81-81, had some really good production out of a lot of young guys on this roster, and they've since added a number 1/2 type starter in Garrett Crochet, added a big game pitcher in Walker Buehler, supplemented that bullpen a little bit, and then, of course, got a huge impact right-handed bat for that lineup that they absolutely needed. Would I say this team is going to make the wild card? I do. I think this is a wild card bound team at minimum. And I think they make that wild card comfortably. I think this is a team that goes from 81 wins to the neighborhood of 92 to 95 wins. I think they'll challenge the New York Yankees for winning the division. I think the Orioles are going to be right there with them. I think the one issue for the Orioles I still have is their lack of a number 1 on the staff. They've lost a couple of big pieces on that team. They lost Anthony Santander, replaced him with Tyler O'Neill, but he does have injury issues. They also have a couple of other outfielders they've added to kind of supplement that roster if they do have some injury issues this season, but it's nowhere near the level of what Anthony Santander brought them last year. And of course, they lost a top 5 in the Cy Young voting guy in last year in Corbin Burns. They haven't really replaced anybody or replaced him at the top of that rotation. They're trying to go more of a committee approach here to replace him with Sugano, and Morton and others. But to me, this rotation still is starving for a number 1 at the head of this rotation. I think they will add one, but until they do, I have them sitting at least 3rd in that tough AL East division. As far as making a wild card spot, remains to be seen. I think they'll have a very good 162-game season. I think there's a good chance they win over 90 games, but I think the Red Sox, as currently constructed, are just a little bit ahead of where the Orioles are right now, at least. Now, say they add a Pablo Lopez or a Sandy Alcantara, I think that would jump them right back to the front of the line there for best in the AL East. But for Boston, 2025 projection, I'm going to go ahead and say they win. I'm going to go ahead and say they win 95 games and finish the season as the number 1 or number 2 wild card. I don't think they'll be in competition for that number 3 spot. I think they'll be far enough ahead of those of that final wild card spot where they won't have to worry about it. I think they'll be closer to winning the division than they will be falling out of the postseason. So really like where the Red Sox are at going into 2025. How far will they get once they get to the postseason? I think this is a team that's got some good veteran leadership on it, with Walker Buehler in that rotation, with Bregman in that lineup. But I think they got a lot of youth on this team, and I think they're going to have even more youth when they call up Anthony and Campbell and Mayer, that they're going to have to get their feet wet at the major league level first, get their feet wet in the postseason, and then they'll be a real threat in 2026 when I think they'll add another impact bat to that lineup as well, maybe even another impact starting pitcher to that mix as well. But this Red Sox team is looking good for the bright future that they're going to have. They have a long runway of success here, and I don't think they need to short circuit it here by trading away big long-term pieces of this team for guys that have 1 year left on their contract like a Dylan Cease. So kind of keep that in mind. If they see an opportunity out there to improve this roster, I think they'll take it. But I think this is a team that might win a round in the postseason, but I don't think they're winning the World Series. I don't think they get to the ALCS. Best case scenario, if everything breaks just the right way, maybe they get to the ALCS, get to a Game 6, and then fall a little bit short. But I don't think that ultimately happens. I think they win one series, and that's about it. Best case scenario for them. As far as trades, we just discussed some of the trades that they could make this year. I think that there's some options that they could add with their bullpen right now, even on the free agent market. Even just calling some guys up that are already signed, like Adam Ottavino, I think has a chance to make the roster out of spring training. But we'll see how injuries and so forth, how those kinds of things affect this roster as they narrow it down to their opening day roster. JS, welcome in. Red Sox offense was really good last year. They will be fun to watch. I think they'll be even more fun to watch this year because of the additions of Alex Bregman and Crochet and the Anthony coming up and Campbell coming up and Mayer coming up. I think at some point this year, this offense is going to be, think of it a lot like the Oakland A's or Sacramento A's last year. This offense didn't have much last year for the A's. And then they decided to keep Rooker, and then they got some other pieces going like Butler, and then all of a sudden, they were one of the best offenses in the league. I think the Red Sox could very well have the best offense in all of the American League with the roster that they have put together already, and it could be even better in 2026. Offseason grade, I'm going to give them an A. I'm going to give them an A minus. I really liked everything that they did. They filled pretty much every hole that they have. Their inexperience showed as far as negotiating with Alex Bregman. I think not getting him signed to a long-term deal fully guaranteed is a miss for them. I think having him on a 3-year deal, $120 million, even with the deferrals knocking that value down, or at least the present day value down, I think they're going to regret signing that contract when he really tears it up this year. I'm expecting a big offensive year from Alex Bregman. MVP worthy? I'm sure there'll be people saying that he's performed that level, but I'd probably put him more in the top 10 rather than in the top 5 of MVP voting, but we shall see. But I'll say their offseason was an A minus for me. I just think they should have gotten a long-term deal with Bregman more than anything else. Other than that, I think they could have used another impact bullpen arm, but other than that, they've really done a nice job, finally addressing the needs that they have on this roster, adding a top-end starting pitcher, adding an impact bat, and most importantly, finally spending on this team like like they've been saying to fans for the last 2 or 3 off seasons. As far as growth and surprises, what could they do that might surprise us? Like I said, I'm predicting about 95 wins. So say they surprise us, and Roman Anthony comes up and wins the American League Rookie of the Year. It's knocking the cover off the ball. Duran steals 50 bags, and Bregman has 120 RBIs, and Devers transitions seamlessly to wherever he needs to play defensively, and this team looks great. Maybe they win 100 games and win the division. That's kind of best case scenario. I think they still have best case scenario win the first round, maybe a second round series and get to the ALCS, but I don't think they make it to the World Series. I think this team is just a little too young to get that far. Floor for this team, say the Bregman signing goes poorly. They have injury issues. The clubhouse issues with Devers and Bregman boil over. The youth that they're counting on ultimately doesn't work out. They trade for a Dylan Cease, mortgage their future to try to salvage the season. That's kind of worst case scenario for the Red Sox. As far as where the win total would be at that point, I think you're looking probably 83 to 85 wins. They'd probably miss out on the playoffs at that point. That's kind of the floor for the Red Sox. But I think more realistically, they'll be one of the top 2 wildcard teams in the American League around that 95 win plateau. Jerry Duran and Tristan Casas hopefully take a step forward. I think Duran will take a big step forward this year. I think Bregman coming in will be a big help to his game as far as his approach at the plate. Defensively, I think he'll be just fine in center field. I'm not looking for him to improve too much out there. Speed on the base paths, availability, and maturity are where I'm looking for him to improve most of all. And Casas, just consistency as far as offensive performance is where I'm looking for him to improve as well. As far as the Red Sox team, I really like what they've done this year. I like where they're at. I like their future. Really excited for what this team is going to have going forward. So if you guys really enjoyed this video, make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. This has been your 2025 season preview for the Boston Red Sox. We've already done the Cubs, the Mets, the Dodgers, the Rockies, the Giants, the Royals, and now the Boston Red Sox. Will continue with the NL West tomorrow with the Arizona Diamondbacks. They've had a really big offseason this year, and kind of want to get to them and kind of how great of an offseason they've really had and show you just where they're set to go in 2025. But be sure to hit that like, subscribe, follow us on X at Upside Ascend, and on Facebook at Upside Sports Network. Turn on your notifications whenever we do go live. We'll be able to post it there for you guys. Turn on your notifications. That way when we do go live, you'll get those notifications as well. We'll have some short videos coming out for you tomorrow. Recorded those already today. Got those set to be posted to kind of update you guys on some of the other signings we've seen. But appreciate you guys joining us. Hit that like and subscribe. Thank you for all the support you guys have given us. Stay warm out there, everybody. And we'll see you guys again tomorrow night.